Welcome to the AI Corner, the podcast spotlighting New Zealand's AI leaders. In today's episode, we're back with JD Trask, or John-Daniel Trask, I should say. JD is both CEO at Raygun and AutoHive out of Wellington, and there's been a few changes since we last spoke, so welcome to the pod, JD.
Thanks for having me again, Mike. I really appreciate it.
Awesome. So what has changed in the last couple of months since we caught up? I believe you've just returned from the US.
Yeah, well, we're gearing up for the release of our AutoHive platform. So AutoHive is a way for people to go and create, build, discover, and run AI agents to help them run their businesses. And as you say, I just got back from spending a week in San Francisco, a week in Austin. Got back about 48 hours ago. It was a really great trip. I went over there just to connect with other AI leaders of various AI companies, and start to build those relationships and understand how are they seeing the game, what are they seeing out in the market, those sorts of things, as well as partnership opportunities, because that's really important while we're down here in New Zealand to sort of build those bridges out to the other organizations that are playing in the space. And so we're really excited as we build up to release AutoHive.
Awesome. And I suppose on that topic of the US compared to New Zealand, what are you seeing in terms of development progress in that market compared to down under?
Yeah, it was quite insightful. The main thing that I noticed was that there's a huge focus over there on the software development tools. And for those of you that are listening and know me, you'll understand that we have a business in developer tools, but we're not building AutoHive for software developers. So one of my takeaways was about 75% of the companies are focused on what do we build for software teams. We're sort of zigging while others zag there. And then there was a bunch of folks that were building sort of the APIs for people to call. These are the likes of, your 11 labs and sort of text to speech to text, all of the kind of building blocks of AI services. And so that was quite an eye-opener to me. It also highlighted a little bit of how we're differentiating in that, the AutoHive pitch is to sort of say, hey, this is everybody technology. Everybody's got to be thinking about how they bring AI into their organizations and how they personally, individually sort of lean into it. And so by us sort of focusing on that from the very beginning with AutoHive, we're quite differentiated in that regard. I was quite pleased in general with the feedback from folks who, for example, I won't just feature list here, but one of the things we're doing is you bring your whole team in there and you can have multiple agents, AI agents. So this might be, a ChatGPT backed agent that's a specialist in investment, and a Claude-backed agent that's a specialist in, governance, and then have three team members. And you're all sort of riffing and discussing in one chat and able to tag in these specialized AI agents like their virtual team members. That kind of multiplayer style of engagement is really unique at the moment in this space. Everybody's kind of quite focused on the what I call single player mode. I sit down and I work directly with ChatGPT, and then that's it. That's the end of the story. So that was something that really stood out as well overall on our approach and how we're thinking about it.
Awesome. Would love to dive a bit more into the platform and how it works. Shortly, I've been playing around in the background, but when can we expect the launch? Like, how close are you to being GA or generally available for everyone?
Yeah, sure. It's a great question. So we're launching at the time of this recording. It's going to be next week, so the 24th of June, New Zealand time, which is a Tuesday. Then we're having a launch party on the Wednesday, and so it'll be available for everybody to go and sign up for by the time probably this podcast is out. Just go to autohive.com. We are looking at having a fairly generous free tier so that people can join and experience the product and learn it. But we're also encouraging those that are early adopters to reach out and engage with us, because while we're not trying to price it like it's a really expensive enterprise product, we understand that everybody's learning this technology. And so it's a case of saying, hey, let us handhold you. We'll even build some of these agents for you if you're struggling a little bit with that, or even looking for ideas on how you can improve it in your business. We want to have those conversations with folks.
Wicked. It might be helpful for us to, dig into what AI agents are. I know we talked about briefly last time, but how do you define them? Has your definition began to evolve as you've got deeper into this, development process?
Yeah, I would, there's a lot of discussions that really break it down into quite a lot of nuance, and I don't actually kind of go that deep into it. My view is that an agent is an LLM that's got tool usability and therefore can adapt and change and use the plan to affect the world around it. So at the moment, you talk with ChatGPT and you kind of query in, get the response. but you're not really affecting the world around you. To me, an agent is something that could be doing proactive things for you in your organization. So an example, that we have is we have agents that are analyzing the inbound trials for our Raygun business and looking at the folks that sign up, indicating what type of use cases they might have and helping the team understand how best to sort of accommodate that new interest. And so, but the only way to achieve that is for that agent to be able to interact within our live trial feed, to be able to go and do Google searches, to go and look up things on LinkedIn and tightly integrate across the tools we already use. So those updates might be coming through to Slack, where the team are already living, those sorts of things. So I don't kind of go right down into the actually, and get all technically, over the top on it. I also think about it through the lens of the users, the human users, which is a lot of people are still just adapting to the ChatGPT moment. They're not really at the agent stage yet, but once you see tool using LLMs, it's quite an epiphany for kind of going, oh, okay, I can see how this really starts to break out of that box and affect the things in my organization and life.
Amazing. Yeah, I think you're exactly right. It's just sort of getting hands to tool is the kind of first, I guess, job for most leaders to kind of implement AI within their business. What I'm seeing and talking to a lot of people about is how most organizations are actually stalling at that proof of concept phase. They pay an expert or they build something in-house because there's a bunch of enthusiasm. Um,
Yes.
Build what I would call an AI assistant half the time. It's not even really an AI agent, but the
hmm
real momentum doesn't really get going within the business. But as I understand it, AutoHive is there to kind of break open that box and give businesses the tools to really harness the power of AI agents.
Yeah, so this is part of our journey as well, was that, in late 2023 and early 2024, we were building agents to do some of these things to help accelerate our core business. And my takeaway from it was we were seeing real value from it, but we, not to brag, we have a really hardcore engineering team who are really top of their game. And I was like, there's not a lot of organizations that have a team like that sitting there ready to deploy to do this. And that was actually part of the opportunity, was to sort of say, well, what can we create that would actually streamline this for all organizations? Because it is an everybody technology. And so we've tried really hard to take an approach where you can jump in there, give it a prompt, give it a model, attach some tools with just a couple of toggles, and away you go for testing. As the person behind sort of helping get it built, I'm really loving playing on the platform at the moment because I can make an agent in sort of like 2 to 3 minutes and see some really cool outputs from that. Of course, we do provide mechanisms if people want to integrate, say, with in-house data stores or things where we might not have a direct integration. And that's probably the one place where if you want to go that hardcore, you go to a little bit of development effort. But overall, we're trying to say, how do you make this as easy as using ChatGPT for everybody to construct and run an agent in there? That to me is the big unlock. And what you said before is bang on. A lot of people are sort of jumping to, I want a full assistant, and I don't blame them. We've all sort of grown up, seeing Jarvis, and things like that. And we're making these reasoning by analogy of kind of going, oh, well, okay, well, that must be what AI is, but we're far from being able to say, hey, can you build Ultron for me and then go have a party? We're quite far from that. And so one of the things that's important to us within AutoHive is to not oversell. The technology today is absolutely amazing compared to the prior status quo, but it's not yet at that place where it kind of can run your entire company. I don't even think it's at the stage where it's fully replacing roles that people are worried about. And our sort of argument is to say, look at some of these toil processes in your organization and streamline those. Take away the little bits of work that everybody has on their plate that they don't enjoy. Start there and build up. So it's a little bit more incremental. And another reason for that, and this is, maybe a little bit on the nerdy side, but because the more you try and get an agent to do, the higher the likelihood that it makes a mistake, right? And so you actually want to encourage people to build quite focused agents on maybe one or two little problems and have that, and then just make more agents for the other problems. Don't try and build one super agent that can do absolutely everything. I do think that future is coming. It's going to rely a lot on the model providers, but at the moment, it's really about incrementally improving your organization and processes.
I completely agree. I think there's, and posted on LinkedIn, which caught a bit of fire from certain people. And I said, I think the hype is overblown at the moment. And
Mhm.
I'm sure there'll be elements of it coming for sure. But you dig deeper into some of these tools and their capabilities, and they're certainly not replacing full workers at the moment. And so businesses really need to think of it from the augmentation rather than the replacement path, right? You mean you
Yes.
could either go and fire a bunch of staff and you could make more money per barrel of sale if you're selling beer or Guinness, or you can go and be Guinness and hire 100,000 more people and expand more worldwide because you are now, turbocharging your workforce, right? So I think a lot of people are choosing, call it the small path with how they think about where AI can be applied. And to your point, we should be deploying narrow AI agents, but this should also be part of a bigger strategy around how AI plays into it, rather than thinking about the micros or if I can get rid of one or two people over here. I should be thinking about how can I expand my business and look for growth
Yes.
opportunities, not for reduction of headcount.
I 100% agree with you on that. It's about improving the productivity. It's about getting more done with what you have. So it shouldn't be about trying to reduce. I think that that's just a minimizing mindset. And I think AI fundamentally should be an abundance mindset. It should be, how can my organization do in 6 months' time 50% more output for the same input cost? How in 2 years, how could that be 3x? Those sorts of things. I do think that there are some sort of roles that will be affected. I don't want to completely downplay it, and this might sound a bit worrying, but I think it's more likely to manifest in the demands on service providers initially. So, if you're using a lot of, say, legal resource, you might be able to get some of those early low-hanging fruit questions answered by these sorts of systems, and be confident enough with that. It doesn't fully replace the profession, and the profession should as well be able to handle more with their headcount. But that's really about the stage we're at now. I don't think we're in the whole replace people scenario. And to be honest, it's one of the grinds I actually have is we want to build an AI company. We want to lean into this, especially for New Zealand, and lift it up. But there is a lot of fear out there. And I worry that the folks that are more focused on the fear are kind of making the mistake of not leaning in and becoming experts. I like to say, us Kiwis, fight or flight. Well, we don't even know how to fly, so we've got to fight.
Well said. It's maybe a counterpoint, or I suppose to unpack it a bit further. One area that does come across my mind, and it's been hyped up in the media recently as well, is what happens to the entry level worker. And I guess the way I'm thinking about it is call it the apprenticeship is almost at risk, right? Because previously a junior, and we'll use a law firm as you brought it up, the junior would begin to write and do research and prepare documentation for a senior or a manager. And now that they can use AI to turbocharge that process, their ability to understand what is kind of wrong or what is right is starting to be reduced, I suppose, because they're not getting as much feedback on poor outcomes, or they're having less shots on goal, which means that they're not able to deduce what is good and bad quality as part of that. So I do wonder if that kind of 4,000 year chain of on the job learning, call it the apprenticeship, is sort of breaking, so to speak, as junior staff are able to use AI to look smart. And also you've got seniors, conversely, who are able to use AI or deploy AI to their junior people without having to mentor, perhaps. I don't know if you have a perspective on how we start to think about those who are now entering the workforce and making sure that they're future-proofing their own careers by not only just using AI, but also understanding what bad looks like, I suppose, when it comes to their job.
It's a big question. My observation, firstly, even if you're only getting started now, you're not too late. We're still in the early innings. So, if you're listening to this and thinking, oh gosh, what should I be doing? You're not late, So just start having a tinker around with things and exploring. My observation is that some of the stories around junior people, at the moment, there's clearly an issue, and this is worldwide, not just New Zealand, around unemployment, especially at, say, graduate levels. I am convinced that that is not an AI related concern. I think it's the hangover of the economic outcomes of COVID. And I think plenty of people want to try and use the AI narrative for a lot of cost cutting right now that's not real. It just sounds like a better message for the market. But what I've seen in my own organization and from having conversations with a lot of leaders is, in many ways, it's inverted, which is to say that if you've got a curious young person who's just coming in and they are actually using these tools to learn. So, for example, when we're working on AutoHive, we've got quite a few young engineers here, and we have senior engineers. But we could say, hey, I need you to go and work on this feature. And they might have never, ever considered how that would be built. But they can go to Perplexity, say, and ask for a deep research report on the topic and say, write me complete analysis of this sort of area, the pros, the cons, how have other companies solved it, that sort of thing, and generate that insight for themselves and then run with that information. I think that that is the key point of difference between people who are sort of winning with this technology and those that are perhaps not, is that curiosity. You can pretty much ask the question on anything of like, how could I solve this with AI? Now, it doesn't mean that everything should be solved with AI, but you can say, oh, well, I could go and ask it to help educate me. What I'm seeing at the other end, and I'll pick on software engineers in this case. I'm a software engineer by trade. I'm deeply passionate about it. I'm seeing a lot of senior folks who are actually having rings run around them by the junior folks, because the senior folks have spent so long learning their craft that, and this is obviously a generalization, but I think a lot of them have forgotten how to learn. I think that they've become so comfortable in their skills and they feel threatened by the fact that they have to relearn, they have to re-educate. And so I'm watching senior tech leaders who are just struggling to figure out how to use these tools, while I'm watching juniors like 10xing the output. And of course, there's a lot of cope that comes in with that. It's like, oh, it makes mistakes and all that. I joke, our Raygun business, we process billions of software errors for our customers. Humans make so many mistakes, it's ridiculous. And so sitting there tutting an AI for making a mistake is, I don't know, frankly embarrassing to see, because it's just, we're the same. It's very similar. So to kind of recap on that, the folks that are genuinely curious, that kind of almost ask 50 questions a day, that trigger deep research reports, and they're kind of reading and they're trying to learn, those folks are flying. And fortunately, that is actually often the people that are just coming out of university, because they're still in that mode. The senior that's 40 years old and running a team, they're not in that mode. And frankly, learning is kind of hard work.
I love your point around pot calling the kettle black around humans and errors, etc. I agree. I think the riskiest role in the company is actually also the mid-performer, someone just doing the repeatable work, not really bad enough to be noticed, but not good enough to outperform AI. And if they're in that group, honestly, AI is flattening hierarchies, right? It's exposing them as well. It's making people who are not taking advantage of that technology they're going to become irrelevant fairly quickly. So as you say, that service level of an organization or that service type role is more and more threatened as we go through this process. But I suppose for you around AutoHive, you've made it sound very, very simple. I suppose is anyone it's best suited for today? And are there organizations that it isn't suited for at the moment who wouldn't find as much value from the platform?
Yeah, it's a great question. So we've had a few hundred folks kind of come through the early access while we've had it privately available. And it really comes down to not a single sort of role or a single type of industry. What we're noticing is, to that point about the curiosity and being able to leverage it, is that folks are appearing at different places and organizations that really kind of click to the technology, and they're lighting up and being able to do a whole lot. I was actually in a meeting with one organization that was one of our early adopters, and they were talking about this thing that they were looking to try and do, and one of their team members was using Manus and creating software packages, but this person was not a software developer at all, and they were solving the problems right there and then, because they just were clearly taking that action of, well, let's just see if I can do it. And so encouraging that sort of exploration is a really important thing when we are learning new things. And I talk a lot about this within our own organization, and how I mentor other business leaders, is to say, when you're trying to get your team to adopt a new technology or learn a new paradigm, you have to make it feel safe to go and experiment and learn. You can't make it so that people are expected to be awesome at it on day one. They're going to run into scenarios where it doesn't work very well. And that doesn't mean that the technology is a complete write-off either. And it doesn't mean that the individual is either. You have to create that space to learn and thrive and experiment. And to be honest, even though we're building an AI platform, we're launching it, I'm clearly deeply into this. I'm building agents at home, doing all this for the last few years. And yet every single day I see things on, say, Twitter or LinkedIn where I'm like, oh, wow, that is an amazing use of the technology. I hadn't even thought about that. And that's what I mean even earlier about it's not too late. It's nobody is an expert with this technology right now. I still remember Greg Brockman from OpenAI tweeting that when they launched the deep research capability. And he said, this was actually surprisingly basic to build, and you kind of see, well, if the actual labs are kind of discovering, oh, if I just hold the tool this way, I can achieve this great outcome, that's really interesting to see. That's why not only do you want to try and make it safe to explore and tinker and all of that to help people learn, but where is the edge? Where are the opportunities we're not even thinking of? We've had similar experiences with AutoHive where the team have made various agents and kind of gone, oh, we thought we were going to have to go and build this kind of capability to support it. No, you can just get the agent to do it if you just think this way about it. It's been really incredible to observe.
That's awesome. And there are so many platforms out there. You mentioned OpenAI and various others that are all starting to dip toes with. Google's got its own agent space and Salesforce has got its own wrapper around existing LLMs. What sets AutoHive apart from these other agentic platforms?
Yeah, well, it's certainly a time where there's a lot of innovation going on. My sort of observation, and part of, again, how we're trying to zig while others zag, is that multiplayer experience. So putting your team together, rather than everybody just having a single login and then being able to maybe click the share link to drop a link to a team member somewhere else, bring the team in together. Secondly, making it super easy to construct these agents. So being able to just toggle things on and off and really experiment quite fluidly. Yes, I have no doubt that some of these other platforms will bring that type of capability to bear at some point, but they haven't yet. Similarly, the idea that we want to get to where people can share these things and really start to collaborate. So let's say, you build an amazing agent that helps you with editing up your podcasts. You might choose to then share that with other people who are in the creative space. We will also plan to make it so that you could monetize that. So can you make these agents and tools that do really cool stuff and make money out of it? Because that's the other question, right? As AI starts to drive things down in price, how do we make sure that the people who are creating these really valuable tools can be remunerated for it and benefit from that? And that's not really something that exists in the market yet either. So we're trying to move very quickly in that direction. Overall, I've always prided myself on being able to translate really technical stuff. Like I love assembly code. I love talking about CUDA kernels. I love all of the tech. But at the same time, it's really important to realize that all of this only exists for human beings. And human beings are not all that nerdy. And so how do you translate that into something that's accessible, understandable, non-threatening, and actually genuinely valuable? And so that's really part of our aim with this, is to say, let's not get overly excited about the technology for technology's sake, even if I personally love that part. Let's focus on the human and making sure that they are going, holy heck, I actually just saved myself a few hours of work. As we kind of joke around here a little bit, it's like AutoHive is really about how do I get to go home at lunchtime? It's not about, hey, look at me, I've got all these cool AI things. It's like, what's the human benefit of all of this technology?
As you say, that the human role could become more about management by exception because the AI agent is sort of doing the job to an extent for you, but you're still the orchestrator at the end of the day. Love the point on the AutoHive ecosystem or the App Store. I think there's a real opportunity in that marketplace segment. I suppose, what have you found difficult or harder than expected when building the AutoHive platform? Were there any assumptions that didn't hold up or any key lessons that came the hard way?
Well, given we're about to launch, I'm sure we're about to discover a whole bunch that we haven't even encountered, but we will work tirelessly to iron those out as quickly as we can. But multi-agent orchestration is a fundamentally difficult problem. And so what I mean by that is, let's say you have 3 agents in a conversation, 2 humans. How do you make it so that the conversation flow feels natural? How do you make it so it's easy for people to still control it if it's not kind of working how you would expect? Those sorts of things are in there, are quite important. Similarly, we are not locked to a single model. So we're not saying, hey, you have to use, Anthropic's API or Gemini's, but therefore we have to make sure that things like the tool calling, and again, this is a little bit under the covers, but how does all of this capability seamlessly translate as you maybe want to experiment with different models to experience whether it provides a better outcome for you? Those are the sort of AI specific challenging areas. for us to get working. But at the same time, it's been really fun. And I keep saying to the team, it's like we're pioneers here. This is not solved space. This is genuine innovation on how we figure it out. And one of the things that stands out to me as a builder in this area is a lot of folks are really focused on what we call the zero shot sort of outcomes. And that, for the folks listening, means, I want to give it one prompt and just get the perfect answer every time. And the reality is that, firstly, it is kind of amazing when that works, but it fools you into thinking that it will always work that way. What we find is it's actually better to lattice multiple layers of LLM engagements. So, for example, in order to achieve that natural chat, we have something we call our intelligence layer. It's an internal name. We don't talk about that outside of the organization, but that's effectively an agent that can sort of watch over the chat and see an engagement and kind of go, well, that probably actually relates to this message here. Therefore, it should go here. So learning to sort of apply this abstract concept of intelligence where you need it becomes really important overall in there. Like I say, it's still not perfect. We're going to keep iterating. We're going to keep making more things. And the team, frankly, as we've been building it, we just keep kind of going, hey, now wouldn't it be cool if we added this and this and this? So like our roadmap for the next 2 years is already fully baked. And some of the stuff that's coming, I'm so excited about, but we just have to get version 1 out the door.
Good on you. And I suppose as part of, as you say, the lattice network or lattice framework with different AI agents, it's important to have human in the loop playing a pretty critical role as part of those workflows too, right?
Human in the loop is absolutely critical. And so we're going to launch a mobile app in the next few months that will be a companion app. And I say to people, it's like, what I want to ultimately get to is having AutoHive read your calendar, read your emails, build out your task list for the week. And when you wake up in the morning, and I'm looking forward to beta testing this myself, I want to wake up in the morning and have the companion app have push notifications to my phone of where the agents have got to. So they might be blocked on something like, hey, I've drafted that email to your investors. This is what it says. Do you want to send it? So I want to wake up in the morning, and I'm like a lot of people, I reach for my phone before I even get out of bed, and I want to look at that and be like, yes, no, this thing shouldn't happen. And I actually just adjust this email to say this, and then when I get out of bed, I want to think, you know what? I've already got all my work done till 11 o'clock in the morning. That's the goal. And that's where I come back to that point about the human element of artificial intelligence is it should be about giving people back the freedom, the ability to work how they want to work. I don't think some of the ways that some of the arguments are that during COVID, like, hey, work from home and all these things were a better way to work. I don't think they necessarily were. I think that they were requirements on how we worked, and some people got quite comfortable with them. But the reality is AI is kind of allowing us to plan how we want to work rather than react to how we have to work. And so I'm really, really engaged in that view of how do we get it so productivity is up, people are not having to do as much toil work, but they are achieving greater outcomes. And while it's going to be an international product, this is really important to me when it comes to New Zealand. As you know, we have productivity issues here, and I want to be able to be a key player. And how do we fix that? How do we leverage this technology to really start to improve our society here?
Awesome. And it sounds as though a lot of the use cases that we've talked about are general in the most positive sense, right? They're applicable to everybody. How do you start to think about specific industries building for their very kind of technical and verticalized use cases as well? How do you enable that type of functionality and capability?
Yeah, it's a great question. And there is certainly commonality. One of the great questions we kind of have is, what's the vertical you're going after? And I just am not convinced that this is a particularly verticalized technology. Similarly, when we're talking with people inside of organizations, like the example I gave earlier, it's often not who you would expect that is sort of getting the most out of this. And those people become the educators and demonstrate the power of this technology internally. When it comes to specific verticals, and I'll use software as an example, there is a lot of amazing coding tools out there. One of the ones that I've been exploring recently is AMP Code from the folks at SourceGraph that's really capturing a lot of attention in the last few months. And now the question becomes, how could you work with that? Well, we could possibly make it so that is a tool that's available within the platform. So your agent might be able to orchestrate and run that capability so that is effectively encapsulating a verticalized capability within there. Similarly, when we talk about tools, for folks, tools you can think of as things that can interact with other systems. So if we build, say, a tool or get an MCP even that, say, talks to Xero, okay, make an agent and just attach the Xero tools and specialize that agent around analyzing your financial data and giving you insights. Now, the thing here is, going back to that example, is you might just toggle on a couple of buttons and give a prompt that says, you are an expert accountant in New Zealand accounting law. Use the tools that are available to you to provide me these insights. So the ability to create things for particular verticals on the platform is really important, and it's actually quite easy. I actually built one on the plane as one example. My share portfolio, I use a great product here called ShareSite, which is also a New Zealand tech company. And, I just manage my investments myself through that. And so I made an agent where I can effectively take the data from ShareSite, and I have it email me a PDF report now every Friday that gives an expert analysis. It does Google searches to analyze what these companies are up to, make recommendations on my portfolio. It doesn't take action on it. I want to read about it and understand it. But effectively, for the cost of about 20 cents, I now have an expert financial advisor that can operate on my data. So the verticals are really about the agents. So you can think of agents as being the future of application software. That is something that I actually strongly believe in. And so therefore, we're building a place where you can have any type of agent, means that you should be building the verticalized, specialized agents on the AutoHive platform. There is nothing that's going to prevent somebody from doing that. So if you're running a steel manufacturing, organization, you could absolutely come in there and build agents that maybe focus on your compliance reporting, that may be around the quality of the materials that perhaps need filing. There's nothing to prevent that.
As you say, that composability is going to be super important between existing agents and applying them to different tasks, but also integrating external data sources or other kind of tools from the sounds of things as well is going to play really strongly in there. And so there's a lot for, I guess, newcomers to the space who are just grappling with ChatGPT. That next level up is looking at an AutoHive kind of platform. And what would you encourage brands and businesses to be thinking about as they plan ahead, not only for your launch, but just in general about how do I apply AI across my business? Like, is it safe to say you should look for a use case across a team or a business unit? Should you look for use cases across the organization? Like, how do you encourage organizations to think about it? And how will AutoHive, I guess, enable brands and businesses to get started on day one?
Great question. So I'm going to answer this in three parts. It'll be a little bit long. First, I'm going to start with a story about how I started driving AI through our existing business. And so this was in early 2023, and we actually spent a week, we called it our AI week. And the main thing we did was we actually divided up into cross-functional teams of about 4 or 5 people, and we said, we want you to go and build some sort of agentic capability. Now, we had a list of ideas, but we actually just said, let's see what you can do. And people discussed those, and they came up with some amazing ideas. And this again goes back to why it's not really about replacing people, and it's really about leaning into your own creativity. I was blown away by some of these things that folks came up with. They were better ideas than I would have come up with, overall, and they managed to implement them. And that's why you actually want to harness, I say to people, it's like, you haven't really, employed a in-house counsel. You have leased gray matter. You have hired a brain that can do a lot of other stuff. And how do you get value from that? So creating that space for the team to freeform learn. I also find a really powerful question for folks is, what is something that takes you 1 hour or longer every week that you just hate doing? Everybody can name about 5 things right off the bat. They'll be like, this thing, this thing, this thing. And it's like, cool, let's start by just thinking about how we might automate that, and that can be something then you immediately scratch your own itch. And so that worked very well. The second one is making the tools available. Like, I was actually quite surprised to learn how many organizations are still only just starting to allow their teams to actually use various tools. I think one of the biggest mistakes I'm seeing, and I see this, to be frank, with larger organizations where it's kind of like, hey, but we have a Microsoft agreement, so we use Copilot. And it's like, to be blunt, Copilot sucks compared to just about everything else. Like, you are harming your team by sticking to your organizational allegiance here. Spend some money, go and try these tools. And frankly, they're not that expensive in the grand scheme of things for for the productivity output. So allow the team to put those on the table. Lastly, make sure you establish some rules. So, one of our ones is no customer data is going into a third-party AI system. These are, the common sense rules that you should roll out, you should be thinking about in there. Put them in place just so people do know where the guide rails are, and then let them experiment freely around that. So those sorts of things are really important. Also, celebrating what people are doing with AI. I encourage people to have like an AI channel in their Teams or Slack or whatever communication tool they do, for people just to share, and say, hey, I saw this thing, as I say, I read a lot of Twitter and a little bit of LinkedIn, and I see ideas every single day. Share those, because again, it's about reorientating your thinking about how we solve problems. I come back to that point of, I'm an engineer. And so I always think in terms of procedural code almost, like how would I build software for this? And then it's like, why am I building software? I just asked the agent to do this thing, and so you're really just trying to shift the way you look at it. And that's where it's really important for business leaders to understand. I think they actually have a duty of care to their teams on how do I upskill them on AI, not even for our own organization, but for society in general. This is a large scale change. Everybody's going to go on this journey. You don't want to be the person who's dragged along kicking and screaming.
Great way to end it. And you mentioned that the key point there, that people are always going to default to their default behavior, yourself to code, whereas agents are available. And that shift doesn't happen overnight. You've just got to start with giving people the tools, the direction from leadership, and giving them some guardrails so they know where to focus and how they're not going to put the business at risk, really, which, is also going to be, a low risk at that as well.
Make it fun. Make it fun. That's the piece. People learn a lot better when they're enjoying themselves and when it's fun. And I do a lot of public speaking, and I always think to myself, no matter what the topic is, first off, I'm there to entertain. Why am I there to entertain? Because when somebody is happy and enjoying themselves, they're actually far more receptive to retaining and learning. And so, goof around with the image gen tools, play with that stuff, drive a sense of excitement around it. Don't start out with something horribly boring, and feeling a bit threatened. So this should be an exciting time for the people leaning in. It should not be a scary time.
Great stuff. And just to recap for the audience, what's the next steps here? You're launching on Tuesday. Do you want to give us the date and how people can get access or get in touch?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're launching on the 24th of June in New Zealand, and they can go to autohive.com. So it's just those two words, .com. And they should be able to sign up for free on there. We do have a great community site. So again, we understand that everybody's learning, even if you've got, this might be the first AI tool you've signed up to. Jump in there. You're going to find a supportive community. Our whole team has been on this journey together. They're excited to engage with folks. We're also going to be running a lot of regional events, both in New Zealand and further abroad. We're calling them cooking classes, where we want to bring in organizations and sort of say, hey, let's spend an hour or two building these things together and learning. There's a huge opportunity in helping upskill everybody there. And so go to autohive.com, sign up. There are some agents already in there, so you can kind of see pre-built ones. You don't even have to worry that you're going to have to make the first one. And just quietly, you can pay one fee and you're going to have access to ChatGPT, Gemini, Claude, all of these models in one place. So you don't have to go and sign up for a $20 account here, a $20 account there, a $20 account here. It's actually all in one place. And it's also very secure. So we focused heavily on that. That's one last point to really emphasize, is that is one of the concerns about data. All the data on the AutoHive platform is fully encrypted. None of our team can even read it. So it's a safe place to come and play and explore.
Good stuff. I love the overview there. I'll have to ask my referral fee when people start subscribing due to this podcast. Awesome. Well, thank you, JD, for joining us today. And thank you to our listeners. Please subscribe to the channel for weekly episodes and to hear more from the people building New Zealand's AI future. Until next time, thanks for tuning in to the AI Corner.